In progress.
It's a regularly scheduled meeting of the Finance Committee. We have one bit of business in addition to a review of 3 department budgets. Present at the start of the meeting is Council Greenberg from Ward 1, Council Malachi from Ward 3, Gentile from Ward 4, Council Humphrey from Ward 5, Council Bixby from Ward 6, Council Grossman from Ward 7. And I heard from Council Lipoff, who is out of state and does not have access to join us by Zoom. So I don't expect him, and I see the Council Mickley has also joined us. So 7 out of 8 are here. We have some guests. I see Councilor Block, and I see Councilor Oliver. And I believe that's it as far as additional counselors. Okay, so the first item this evening is 107-25. It is the mayor requesting authorization to appropriate $2 million out of the 6/30/24 free cash to establish an account that will be used to supplement the significant increase in the FY26 health insurance costs. Maureen, I see you have joined us. I assume that you are here to present this item.
Actually, Mr. Chairman, Perry is going to kick us off.
Okay.
And if I need to jump in at all, I am here and certainly am willing and able. But Perry's going to kick us off.
Okay, Perry, it's all yours.
Perfect. Thank you. So I just wanted to give a little bit of background on how we got to this point. When we met with our health insurance consultant in December, they initially gave us a recommendation of 7.8% rate increase for FY26 health insurance rates. That rate included a 2% buffer and was based off of their models, which factored in claims data through November. We next met with them at the end of January, where they revised their recommendation to up to 10.1% based off the inclusion of December data, which showed a large upswing in claims. Keeping in mind that this recommendation also included a 2% buffer, we chose to keep the 7.8% rate steady, as we wanted to continue to monitor data and determine if December was an anomaly. After continuing to monitor claims data through the rest of January and February, we met with our consultants in March, where they revised their recommendation up to 11.2% of an increase. The reasoning for that was both January and February continued to run high, showing us that December data was not an anomaly, and therefore added more weight to their financial models. At this point, and the public schools had already built their budget off the lower 7.8% number, and we didn't want to drop a $1.3 million increase on them so late in the process. So we ultimately made the decision to keep the 7.8% increase in the budget and to request the difference of $2 million from free cash from the city council. However, understanding that when it comes time to build the FY27 budget, both the city and the schools will need an increase to their starting point of health insurance by $700,000 and $1.3 million respectively, before even factoring in potential FY27 rate increases. Thank you.
So, Perry, I'm to assume that of the $2 million, 1.3 is to be used on the school side and 700,000 from the city side, correct?
That is correct. Everything will be under the purview of the comptroller. However, they will be sweeping $1.3 million of health insurance costs out of the school department, as well, and then $700,000 worth of municipal health insurance costs from the city departments.
Okay, yeah, and that's an important clarification. This basic new account will be in the comptroller's budget, and it will be overseen by the comptroller. All right, let me open it up to questions from members of the committee or any other council that's joined us. Any hands? Councilor
Humphrey? Thank you, Mr. Chair. What is the
rough plan for next year to deal with the change in starting point that was just discussed? I mean, I know you don't have the definitive plan, but
So, Mr. Chair, I'll be happy to, as you know, it's a little bit up in the air because obviously Mayor Fuller will not be here putting next year's budget together. So, you know, we will certainly, as we get into the fall, if we have clarity, early clarity on who the new mayor will be, we will probably be working with that person. Otherwise, as soon as the election happens, we would work with that person. My expectation would be that the best way to handle this would be that we take a look at next year's budget, that we more or less add the 1.3 million to the base of the school department, and we add the 700,000 to the base of the city side. And so my thinking would be that almost the first $2 million of either our Prop 2.5 money or our new growth money, or however you want to look at it, but of the total increase for next year, my simple thinking about this is that we would want to put the first 2 million toward adjusting for health insurance. Now, we don't know, we have no idea what's going to happen with the medical trend rates for next year. Hopefully by us going out there with this 11.2, the hope would be we could be back to like a 5 or 6% increase on our rates for next year. I mean, none of that is known at this point. The medical trend rates have really gone crazy. You know, I don't have a crystal ball, but I think the first way that we would want to deal with it would be putting this money more or less into the base of the two different sides of the ledger.
so thank you. So I do understand what you're saying, and I'm certainly cognizant of the point that you make that, you know, it's up to the next mayor to actually decide. But like, again, you know, just trying to game out potential strategies here. When you say put this money into the base budget, what does that mean really?
So in my mind, what it means is that, as you all know, we've said this number enough times at this point already in this process, the school budget is going to be 292.96. I would think we would want to take that 292.96, add 1.3 to it, and then apply, if it's a 3.5% or a 3.65, or, you know, whatever the increase is to the allocation, I would think we would want to try to add the 1.3 to the 292.96 first,
Right.
and then put however we're going to increase the budgets on top of that. So
yeah.
that would be my recommendation for how we would do it. But of course, you know, where it's a different administration, I don't want to be so bold as to be out there saying this is what we're going to do. But that would certainly be my recommendation, that we put both of these numbers into the base and then calculate any percentage increases beyond that.
So yeah, so thank you. So that part does make sense to me. However, that is inconsistent with some of the other points that you've been making over the past, you know, several weeks about how we plan for base budgeting going forward, given our growth, given our free cash situation and so forth. Because, you know, to the extent that someone asks you, hey, can we increase the base budget for X, Y, and Z because we feel that it was less than what it should have been, you know, and then grow from there. The argument that you and the rest of the administration have made is no, we can't do that because then next year, you know, what paid for that base increase that we're now increasing, you know, 3.5 or whatever percent beyond that. So do you, I mean, how do you reconcile what is the difference that the distinction that you're making there?
So I thank you, Councilor Humphrey. It's a great question, because I think, at least for everything that I have said, it's not inconsistent at all. I haven't said that the schools will need to absorb this 1.3 and they'll only get 3.5% on the 292 and the 1.3 is part of that 3.5%. I think that's too far down the road for us to even say. That would not be how I would want to handle it. And knowing a year ahead of time that we have this issue, I think it changes how we, the different levers that we're able to pull, it may change them. And so
Well,
it may
so
be,
if I can just interrupt here, because again, I do understand, maybe I'm not being clear in my question here. So as you said, we don't know what the insurance rate change next year is going to be. Maybe it'll be lower or whatever than it was this year, but it's still going to go up. There's a very little chance that the actual amount of insurance is going to go down, which means that, whatever it ends up being, the dollars, the base dollars for the insurance that we're doing this year are also going to need to be budgeted for next year, right? That's
yeah.
essentially an ongoing operational expense, right? But when it comes to other operations that we've talked about, right? Say hiring a new FTE for something, the argument has been made, well, we can't use free cash for that because that's an ongoing expense. And then, the percentage increase each year is going to grow on top of that. And that person's going to get raises, et cetera.
Yeah.
And so again, I do think this is a similar situation and that I'm not understanding what distinction you're making in how you're thinking about this, where you're willing to incorporate, in this case, the money into the base budget that is then grown next time around, but that in other cases you wouldn't do that because that would be an unsustainable use of free cash. Because where is the money going to come from? I mean, I know, like you said, you don't have a crystal ball, but if that's not how you want to do it for other stuff, why does it work to do it here?
I would say this is a very different animal, if you will. And so this is something that we found out, had we known in the very beginning, had we known in November or December that we needed to increase health insurance by 11.2%, that would have been part of those conversations back then. I don't know that it would have changed the allocation to the schools at all at that point, but we know this now more than a year ahead of time. As I had mentioned the other night, and I forget which evening it was, I think it was the night that the schools were in doing their presentation. We had chosen not to apply any free cash toward next year's budget initially. And so our financial management guidelines have always been that we could use up to 1.5 million toward next year's operating expenditures. Because we had not done that, this is 2 million, so it's a little higher than our guidelines, but it is certainly in the realm of possibilities. Would I like to next year see the city get away from using free cash at all? Sure. But might we decide, because we ended up doing this year, might we decide next year that we are still going to appropriate $1.5 million of free cash? I don't know. So there are so many different variables for a year from now. But what I do know is that we're going to have to figure out how we get this $2 million into whatever the base is next year, whether it's before we put the percentage increases on or afterwards. But we know that health insurance costs have been skyrocketing. I'm sure you've all read that the GIC is completely underwater this year. Many communities are having 12 and 13% increases. And so we know that the medical trend rates have really exploded this year. So we're going to have to deal with it. It's very different than making decisions about hiring a new FTE, at least in my mind.
Well, thank you for answering. I sort of understand the point that you're making in terms of why you see it as a difference. I'm just saying, in terms of money is money, it is functionally occupying the same space. So I think, like you said, you're going to have to figure out how to cover for it or deal with it. And I'm just saying, I think this points to a level of flexibility in exigent circumstances that's maybe not being extended in some other areas. But anyway, I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilor Malachy and then Councilor Grossman.
I kind of following up on that and actually, Ms. Lemieux, I kind of see your point, that I guess personnel, people decisions are more discretionary than deciding to pay health insurance or not. We sort of pay it or not. My question had to do with the estimate and what happens if for some reason things are lower than the 11.2% increase or higher than the 11.2% increase. Would the plan be, you probably can't say because it would be the next administration, but would your recommendation to be to go with whatever as near as we could tell, the actual numbers were, at that point in the year, or stick with essentially the 2 million that we're using right now to try to add that to the base?
So thank you, Councilor Maliki. This health insurance is incredibly complicated. It's not rocket science, but it's complicated when you're running what this year I expect will be about an $82 million program. So an 11% increase means next year we're expecting to spend in total about $92 million. We are billed on a weekly basis for our actual cost of claims. So I live, sleep, and breathe the health insurance numbers because it is such a huge amount. If our actual cost of claims next year are better than what the 11.2% increase would yield, that would be fabulous, because it may be that then our increases next year are less than whatever the norm would be for everybody else. If they are more than the 11.2% would yield, two things happen. So we create, these are working rates that we create because we are self-insured. We pay the actual cost of claims.
Right.
So we have a trust fund that we actually pay into, like, we pay these premiums into our trust fund. We pay all of our actual claims out of our trust fund. If the total cost of actual claims next year exceeds what our revenue from the working rates that we've set generates, we have a reserve in our trust fund to cover that. However, the goal is to either be have our revenues from between the city side and the employees match what our expenditures are, or slightly exceed that. If our costs are higher next year, we'll have our trust fund to cover it, but it would mean that we would probably have to raise next year's rates even by whatever the trend would be, plus then whatever we would need to make up the difference going forward. But that it's a long way away. We work closely with our consultants all the time, and especially in this marketplace. But having the 11.2 cost not materialize would be fabulous, because it will certainly help us going forward. The difference between us and many other employers is we're not paying a premium. We build these rates, and then we pay the actual cost of claims. And so it's like we're like the insurance company.
Mm-hmm. So the recommendation for doing the FY27 budget would be doing it based on our experience for FY26 to date at the time the FY27 budget is being prepared.
Yes, absolutely.
And that would be in the base, or again, would that be sort of a decision whether to put it in the base and apply the percent, or apply the percent and then add it to the base?
So what will happen on the insurance side, totally separate from the budget. On the insurance side, our consultants will work with us. We'll have, another year's worth of claims data. We'll understand what the trajectory has been. There's been huge conversations about the cost of prescription drugs lately. Blue Cross is making different decisions about what items are that they will allow and not allow for particularly drugs.
Hmm.
All that's going to play out over the next few months. Our consultants will then not only take our actual cost of claims by the time we get to next November, December, and then they will forecast out for, the entire book of business for the next 18 months. When you think about this, I mean, we're trying to gauge now how much the city, what our total cost of claims will be over the next 15 months. So it's an art and a science, and it lands somewhere in between. But we will definitely be taking whatever the actuals are next year into account, as well as what they think the medical trend rates are.
And our, what we cover, say, in terms of drugs, is that based on the Blue Cross policy? We just use their policy, or do we have our own sort of formulary?
Well, we can have our own. So because we're self-insured, and that's the beauty of being self-insured, there are some things that we can say, no, Blue Cross, we don't want to do it that way. This is how we want to handle it as the city of Newton for our people. So if Blue Cross comes down with some sweeping change, we don't have to buy into it.
Mm-hmm.
It certainly impacts what we spend,
Right.
but we don't have to buy into it.
Okay. Thank you.
Council Grossman.
Go.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Lemieux, can you sort of backtrack to when we made the change to our current health insurance system? Has it been 2 years at this point since we made the switch and our current arrangement?
I think we're in Perry, are we in our second year with Blue Cross? I think we are.
Yes, we are.
Okay.
So can you, thinking back to that time, I remember being somewhat optimistic or even excited at that point that we expected the changes we were making were going to save us a fair amount in health insurance. And you've made the point comparing to some of the other systems out there, such as the GIC. Do you still feel good about the plan and arrangement that we have as opposed to our other alternatives?
Thank you for asking that, because my answer would be absolutely yes. We made significant changes in our retiree plans, which have saved us more than $100 million in our OPEB liability going forward, with the changes that we made there in no longer being self-insured for our retirees. And for our actives, we pay the actual cost of claims. And so regardless of who we had as as our insurance administrator, if you will, we pay the actual cost of claims. Blue Cross negotiates probably the best contracts across the Commonwealth. They don't negotiate contracts for us. They negotiate contracts for Blue Cross. And so if their calculation is that, I don't know, they pay $1,000 for an MRI. I have no idea if that's true or close or whatever. And we get whatever their negotiated rates are for their entire book of business. So if we were to belong to the GIC, if our people took the Blue Cross plan, they would be paying the same amount for each service as they would, because we would all be paying whatever Blue Cross had negotiated. So we're not, even though we're self-insured, we're not out there on an island unto ourselves. We get the benefit of whatever Blue Cross has negotiated for every level of their book of business. And, and all of the providers have to just sign up and accept whatever their numbers are. And I do believe that, and these companies never share, never. I've been doing insurance for a long time. Nobody would share with us what their reimbursement rates are for anything that they negotiate. But I do believe that Blue Cross has, if not the best rates on everything, certainly absolutely incredibly competitive rates. And when we move to them, so then we pay them an administrative fee for doing all of this, a few $1 million a year. When we switched to them, they agreed to not increase the admin fee for us for the 3-year period. And that was not necessarily true with the companies that we had been doing business with. So I can certainly sit here before you and say, I'm absolutely confident that we made the right decision when we made the move. I don't think that any of us knew or could have predicted that the health insurance market was going to explode the way that it has.
At what point will it be time to look at all of our options once again and confirm that this is still the best approach?
So we have a 3-year contract, I believe, with Blue Cross. So we would have another year with them. We will certainly evaluate, or I would hope that if I'm not here, the next administration would evaluate where we are with our health insurance costs. It is incredibly disruptive to our employees and retirees to change health insurance carriers. But we can do some investigation without going through a full-blown RFP process after 3 years and potentially switching people again. I think it's something that we always have to look at. Once we get to our 3 years with our contract with Blue Cross, I think we have to look at it. I will tell you tomorrow, actually Perry and I, and Ron is on the call, and I'm not sure who else is on this tonight. We have gone out to bid for our 457 plans for all of our employees, which are basically 401ks in the private sector. Tomorrow, we're interviewing all of the bidders on that. We've just changed our dental insurance. We've just changed our life insurance. And so what we've tried to do is go through all the benefits to make sure we're getting the best bang for our buck for our employees and the best cost for the city. So I don't know if the city ought to next year go through a full-blown RFP process again, but it certainly is something that the city ought to always be evaluating.
I don't know how many months in advance it begins, but it can't be that far away. So I'll be interested to follow it as we get closer and, we're making decisions about that approach. Those are really the bulk of my questions. I mean, I certainly understand the state of affairs of health insurance and medical system in our country. And I've seen it play out, in my husband's business and, the annual sort of reevaluation they have to go through. So I get that part, but I do want to lift up Councillor Humphrey's comments because I think his point is valid. That's played out in a lot of other contexts over the course of years that I've been a city councillor. And the only way I can ever reconcile it is to say it's good to be the mayor and to be able to decide what you want to fund and how. But I agree, Councillor Humphrey, and thank you for making those points. Thanks.
Okay, we've been joined by Council Farrell and Council Bixby. You're up.
Thank you, Chair. So I guess just to follow up on the past few questions, recognizing where we are with this contract and where we are with health insurance costs, is there anything we can do to lower costs at this point in time?
I believe there are always things that we can do. And it really starts with education for our employees and our retirees. But now that we're fully insured for the retirees, it's not as much, there isn't as much as we can change there. Excuse me, but we certainly can for our employees and all of our non-Medicare eligible retirees. And so really trying to help people live healthy lives, and make healthy choices, is important. Making sure that we are covering preventive care to the fullest extent possible, because we are not like a typical employer where you cover your people, for a few years and then off they go or they retire or whatever. Our people, it's different when you're a municipality. People stay with us for their entire careers, and then we more or less, from an insurance perspective, own them for life. So I think the things that are most important is that we work with our employee base to make sure that they're making good choices. And some of them we can incentivize. And so with a lot of our unions, we have negotiated where we have a typical either $20 or $25 office visit copay. If someone instead elects to go to a retail clinic, we, instead of a $20 or $25 copay, we have a $5 copay. For an urgent care, we have a $10 copay, again, instead of the $20 or $25. We've analyzed all of these different types of services. We know that the cost of a retail clinic is probably about a third of the cost of someone going to their primary care physician. We know that the cost of an urgent care visit is probably half of the cost of going to a primary care physician. And so if we can help incentivize people to use, not for anything that's terribly serious, I'm not saying that at all, but if you think your child has strep or has an ear infection or whatever, you can you can run them to an urgent care or a retail clinic and only pay $5 or $10 out of pocket. And the difference is that instead of us paying $180 on the city side of the actual cost of claims, we're paying $50 or $60 for the actual cost of claims. That's the most powerful thing that we can do, is steer people in a different direction for non-emergency type of visits. And so that's why we've really tried to structure our copays so that we help people to see the value. But I think education is still something that we are probably lacking and probably need to do a lot more of.
That's really interesting. Thanks.
All set, Council Bixby? Okay. So I had the one question that I had, Council Grossman asked, because my recollection was exactly the same. When we went through this the last time, there was all kinds of optimism that going to Blue Cross would be the right move in many ways, including saving money. So it was interesting to hear that we still think that it was the right move. Are there any other questions that councilors have? If not, can I get a motion, please?
I'll move it.
Okay, Council Maliki has moved the item. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, the motion passes. There are 7 councilors here, 7-0. All right, thank you, Ms. Lemieux. All right, so now we're going to get into budget review. We have 3 departments that we're taking up this evening. We're going to start with the comptroller. And of course, in the comptroller's account is retirement. I see that there are a few folks from the retirement board. First, we have Miss O'Brien, who is the administrator. And then we have, I see Tom Lopez and Kelly Byrne, who are members of the retirement board. I know that the comptroller is prepared to offer some comments. I asked him to be prepared to talk about, the timing of votes that are taken and information that is passed on to the administration. about votes that the retirement board takes in terms of funding dates and monies that they need to, fulfill the dates that they are trying to have the system fully funded. It's always good to get a reminder on how that timing works. At this point, I'm gonna turn this over to Steve Curley, our comptroller. So Steve, again, what I'd like to try and do is to ask that you share with us any achievements that you would care to make us aware of for this fiscal year. And then any goals that you have for next year. And then if there are any changes in your FTEs, please explain that. And then the last item, if there's any particular line item that has an unusual increase or decrease for that matter, if you could explain that to us, and then we'll open it up for questions. So Steve, go right ahead.
Thank you, Chair Gentile, and good evening. So the Comptroller's Office is focused on financial compliance using proper accounting standards. We try to bring transparency, timely reporting to the city while following local and state laws. Some of the accomplishments that we've had in this year, they tie back to fiscal 24, but timely closing of the books, which was in early September, and it actually crossed over me being out a few weeks for the birth of a child. So we still made good timing on that while I was out for a bit. We had certification of free cash in a timely manner, which leads to obviously the appropriations that the mayor dockets for the council's approval. We had a timely audit by CLA, Clifton Larson Allen. The audit was completed right around 12/31, which allowed to have final ACFR, which is the Audited Comprehensive Financial Report, ready for the issuance of the city's debt. As part of that audit, the city received an unmodified opinion, which is the best opinion available from the auditors, and it's consistent to what we've received in the prior years. Some new initiatives that we're putting in place this year and ongoing into next year are trying to expand some of our reconciliation. In recent years, we've really gone towards online payments, which is a big testament to what Ron Mendez, city treasurer, has brought on. As part of that, it requires kind of a different type of reconciliation that we've been doing. And the auditors, as part of their management letter this year, had recommended an additional piece to what we currently do. And so we want to bring that piece on board, which kind of brings the whole process full circle. So we would have payments coming in the online system, which City Hall systems or OpenGov. Those totals match the bank, and then that gets sent to the treasurer's office. The treasurer's office puts it together, day's work. We review it and post it to specific accounts. This final piece would be taking what has been posted and reconciling it back to what actually hit the online payment system. Another thing that we are looking to do is get our capital asset tracking up to speed. We've been using an outdated Excel program for 20 plus years. It leads to some manual errors and just extra work that's outdated and not really necessary. So we've been looking into moving towards a new software system this year. We haven't started it, but it's something that we hope to have up and running in advance of the audit come this fall. Some of the other initiatives that we prioritize are professional development and training. We send staff to different trainings across the Commonwealth. We've also worked towards getting, including myself, we have 3 MCPPO certified members, which has to do with procurement. And there's also 2 CGA certified members, which is a certified governmental accountant, myself and Stella, the deputy comptroller. We also have other staff working towards that designation with hopes that in the coming year, she can pass that exam. So those are some of those aspects, and then get more into the operating budget itself. So from the core comptroller's operating budget, we've held pretty steady in operational expenses, seeing about a $3,600 decrease from FY25 to 26. Meanwhile, in personnel services, in working with the mayor and CFO Lemieux, trying to increase the FTEs from 6.4 to 7. And that is actually going to be an additional docket item that hopefully will move forward for to finance for the 5/12 meeting, and to discuss a little bit about that. So the 0.4 FTE was a part-time unbenefited employee position, and we would like to increase that to a full-time position. So going from a part-time accounting assistant to a full-time accounting specialist role. There's two key reasons on why we're hoping to do this. One of it has to do with that reconciliation capacity that I spoke about earlier with our initiatives. It adds a whole new piece to really what our office is doing, and to be able to get dedicated eyes on that. Another big piece is just in the last few years, the amount of expenses across all city funds. For example, from FY20 to FY24, we've seen an increase from $645 million in expenses to $821 million in expenses. That's across all funds, not just the general fund. And so we want to make sure that we're still maintaining the controls that we have in place for the payments that the city processes. There's been a large increase in capital projects and other expenses, other funding sources that the city has taken on over the years, and we want to make sure that we're not losing any sort of controls in that process. So on to some of the funds that the comptroller's office holds, but they're not really my operating budget. So the comptroller's office holds interfund transfers. This year there is nothing budgeted. Workers' comp transfer, which is $800,000. That's been consistent for as far back as I can remember. There's also hold budgetary reserves under the comptroller's control. And so in recent years, which is consistent in FY26, we've had $500,000 in the current year reserve and $1.5 million in the snow and ice reserves. Those numbers are the same. Current year wage reserve decreased about $1 million for FY26 down to $3.125 million. I'm sure if needed, Ms. Lemieux could probably talk on that, but essentially more contracts have been settled. So there's less unsettled contracts for back pay that would needed to be paid out. Another item that we hold is property insurance. That's increasing about 10% this year to $920,000. And that was at the recommendation of our insurance manager, Nat Shank, and their view on the market. Insurance rates, similar to health insurance rates, just keep skyrocketing up. So those are the main things outside of the retirement budget. So the last major piece of the comptroller's budget is the retirement budget. So the retirement budget, it's made up of the actuarial valuation. It's also made up of retiree health insurance, the school's portion of OPEB. Those are the three major things. And so the kind of work backwards there, but the school's portion of OPEB this year is $3.7 million. And the city side absorbed that starting in fiscal 25. The retiree health insurance premiums are expected to be about $11.6 million, which is an increase of $664,000. And so the main piece is the appropriation. And so the FY26 appropriation to the Newton retirement system is overall is $49.5 million. Of that, almost $47.1 million is to be provided by the general fund. And this was voted by the retirement board at February's meeting in conjunction with the actuarial reports that our actuary Siegel provides to us, and they're based off of the assumptions that the retirement board has in place and reviews each year, which is 6.6% annual increase in the appropriation, 6.9% assumed rate of return, a full funding date of 2032. And there's other minor assumptions, admin expenses, working through with the actuary to build a schedule on how to appropriately fund the retirement pension. So each year the board looks at the status of the pension system. We just met last Tuesday, and Siegel gave us the preliminary report for the 1/1/25 actuarial valuation. The assets came in for the actuarial value of $585.2 million, while we still have a $277.8 million of unfunded liability. This results in about a 67.8% funding status, which still leaves the city of Newton, or sorry, the Newton retirement system in the bottom 20% of funding status out of every retirement board in the Commonwealth. I will stop there and take any questions that you may have.
Before we do that, I just wanted to give an opportunity to Ms. O'Brien or to Tom Lopez or Kelly Byrne. If you guys wanted to add anything, feel free. If something comes up in the discussion and you want to join the discussion, just let me see your hand and I'll call on you in case you want to add help to respond to a question. But as of right now, I don't see anybody that is looking to speak, so I'll assume that you're comfortable observing right now, but feel free to join in. All right, so anything, not just retirement, but anything regarding the comptroller's budget that Steve just shared with us. Questions? I don't see any questions. Okay, Council Maliki.
Yeah, this is probably something I should already know, but have probably forgotten. The current year reserve and the budget reserve for snow and ice of 500,000 and 1.5 million respectively. So we had those last year, we had the same amount this year, but we didn't have them in 22, 23, or 24. What was the reason for the change?
So I can clarify that. So in the exhibit, the 22, 23, 24 are actual expenditures. What you see in 25 and 26 are budgetary numbers. We cannot spend those budgeted reserves out of the reserve account.
Oh, they just get moved to.
And so they
okay.
get transferred through a city council appropriation
Yeah.
to another line item.
So the amounts were actually the same. but
They were budgeted the same. They were just
disappeared.
transferred
Okay.
out.
Good, great, thanks.
You're welcome.
Council Grossman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a question about the current expected full funding date of the pension fund. You said 32, which I know, the last time as a group that we really dived into this, which at this point was probably also 2 years ago, the expectation was that we were making our last pretty substantial payment in August of 2031, which of course is fiscal 32.
Yes.
Is that still the case, or is it the case that the last really super major payment is August 2030 at this point?
No, it is 2031, August of 2031 is the
Can you
last
just go-
substantial one.
Yeah, can you tell me what those numbers are for August 2030 and August 2031 of what the expected payment schedule will be, and then what it goes to in August of 2032?
Yes, I did not have that open, but I can get that open for you in 1 second.
Thank you.
I believe off the top of my head, it goes down from FY31 to FY32, but it's still a very substantial payment. I think it might go down a couple million, but I am getting that on them.
Someone recently made the point to me that those numbers had shifted from the last time we really dived into it. So I just want to make sure I know what they are.
Steve, I have that funding schedule in front of me if you want me to shoot them out.
I just opened it up.
Okay, go ahead.
So in 2031, it will be 68.1 million, and this is across all funds, but as I'm sure you're aware at this point, the general fund carries a massive chunk of that number.
Is that August 2031 or fiscal?
Fiscal 31, so August 2030,
It's 68.1.
68.1. August
Okay.
of 2031 is 61.9. So very substantial, but about $6 million less.
And then what happens in August of
32. So at that point, we will be at full funding status. And as of right now, the appropriation schedule is for about just under 8.8 million.
Okay. I appreciate it. I think a lot of folks on here probably know that I was really involved the last time that a group of us made a request and sort of a push to reevaluate our timing on this, and I certainly understand that we are comparing ourselves to other municipalities. That said, that's not the controlling factor for me. So I just want to continue to raise up the point that I think it's important, and I understand that it's within the retirement board's purview to continue this conversation as these years are going forward, because the increased pain to our operations is just ever increasingly painful and palpable, and it remains top of mind for me. So I'll leave it at that. But I otherwise very much thank you for your report and your work. And it's been a pleasure to watch you and your leadership role blossom in the years that you've been doing this, as well as your staff, who works very hard to keep our controls in place. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'll just add that the being in the bottom 20%, it's not a race to be first. It's just more of showing how behind we are. It's more, that's what more so what the visual is. It's not a race to be first. It's just we are behind 80 some odd communities in having our pension funded at this point.
Okay, you're all set, Council Grossman?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, Council Mickley.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just a question on that topic. How does recent market performance impact the discount rate that we would need to hit that funding timeline? And how often is the discount rate updated, or even projections of the required rate of return updated?
So we review it every year with our actuary. When I joined the board, I think it's 3.5 years ago, our assumed rate of return, I believe, was 7.2 or 7.25. It went down to 7, and then we reduced it to 6.9 maybe 2 years ago. We actually, as part of the preliminary actuarial evaluation that we just received last week, our rate of return on an actuarial value basis was 7.01%. So we are right in line. 6.9, we also are very much in line with other municipalities for their rates. And Siegel also provides us with what their projected rates are over a 10, 15, 20-year basis, and what another advisor, who I believe they are the advisor for PERAC, what their anticipated rate of return is over 10 and 30-year sample. And our number is in line with all of that.
It's good. Surprising to hear based on recent performance, but it's good to hear it hasn't fluctuated that much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Council Oliver, do I see a hand?
You do, sir. Thank you very much. And I will be brief, but I heard Councilor Grossman mention that the numbers were fluctuating a little bit in 2031 or fiscal years 31 and 32. And I assume, Mr. Curley, that that's based on exactly what Councilor Mickley was just talking about, correct? The changes in rates? Or there's some other factor going on.
It's not quite the change in rates. So essentially, FY 25 through 31, if the assumptions stay the same, those numbers are exact. For FY 2032, which would be the August 31 payment, that is going to catch any leftovers. And as long as it's within the capacity of the assumptions that we have. And so right now there is, so that year over year increase, instead of a 6.6% from 2031 to 32, it's a negative 9.8% increase. So as we do this each year with the actuary, that last number is going to move based off of market returns, which does tie back to what Councilor Mickley mentioned. Not as much the assumptions, because we haven't changed the assumptions, but the actual actuarial valuation of assets and the recording of that each year, whether it's recognizing some of the long-term gains or losses.
Okay, so then it's fair to say that those numbers, that if I'm hearing you correctly, those numbers haven't really fluctuated. So the rumor mill that kind of caught Councilor Grossman's ear was perhaps not accurate.
25 through 31 should not, and I'm speaking fiscal year, 25 through 31 should not have changed between when we last changed assumptions, which I think was in January of 23.
Right.
They should not have changed since then.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure that I was hearing that right. I think I got it. Thank you, Chair. That's all for me.
Okay. So, I don't see any other hands. I did not want to, resurrect, the discussion about the funding schedule and so forth, but I did want to make sure it was clear to everybody that the retirement board, which does have fiscal autonomy, we keep asking that question and we keep getting the same answer back from the law department, that they do their homework early in the year and then they transmit the figure that they need to support the decisions that they made as early as February. So if anybody was going to try and change anything, then obviously those kinds of discussions have to happen earlier in the year if you're trying to affect like next year's fiscal budget. I just wanted to remind people of their schedule and when they submit their requested amount. If there are no other questions, Council Maliki, can you just, I do want to take straw votes in committee. Obviously, you can vote in favor, opposed, and also abstentions are certainly in order, but I would like to get a vote on the record. So can you, including retirement and everything, can you just tell us what the bottom line recommendation of the mayor's office is so that we can then take a vote?
Okay, so proposed FY 2026, including everything, 70,400 and, oh God, $62,978. I better check it on another page where I didn't write over it. Yes, $70,462,978.
Okay, and you're moving the item, thank you.
Yes.
Any further discussion? Council Grossman.
Thank you. Since it's a straw vote on everything collectively, I'm going to abstain. Not because I have an issue with the comptroller's department or budget, but as my limited way available to me to express my feeling that I believe we have more flexibility in the pension funding schedule than we're currently being asked to provide. And I know I have very no, essentially, power to change that, certainly at this moment or ever. But I feel that it's important to at least make my opinion known, especially in light of all the other discussions we're having about the budget right now and each year. Thanks.
Okay, all right, thank you. Anyone else? Council Bixby.
Thanks, Chair, and I'll just say that I join Councilor Grossman in that lots of respect for everything that was presented tonight and for the Controller's Office's work. And I think that we just need to be talking right now about all the options available to us, and so we'll also abstain this evening. Thanks.
Council Humphrey.
I will also abstain.
Okay. All right, and I'm sure that, I mean, Council Maliki gives the report on this, and I'm sure that she will make note of, who voted and especially with the abstentions. Council Grossman, are you abstaining or are you voting against?
I'm going to abstain.
Okay. All right, so, and again, Council Maliki, I'm sure will include in the report the abstentions, and it's the reasons are consistent, and I'm sure she'll make that clear. All right, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? I believe there's three.
Aye.
Okay, 3 abstentions. So the motion passes 4-0 with 3 abstaining. Okay, Stephen, thanks for an excellent report and the information.
Thank you all.
Okay, next budget is the treasurer's budget. Mr. Mendez is here. Ron, I know you've been on since the beginning, so I'm not gonna repeat what I said about what we're looking for unless you want me to.
No, I'm good. I'm good.
Okay, and then it's all yours.
Okay, so I'll talk briefly about talk very briefly. I'll talk briefly about what the treasurer's office is responsible for, just to remind everybody I don't get to come to these meetings that often, so it's exciting when I do. So the treasurer's office is responsible to collect all of the city's revenue. We collect all the taxes, all the state aid, everything that comes in comes through our office. We make sure it's deposited in the bank. We report everything to the comptroller's office. And as Steve had indicated earlier, there is a reconciliation that goes on between our office and the comptroller's office to make sure everything is accounted for. And then we invest that money. We put it in banks that are fully secured with either deposit insurance or collateralized with securities or with a line of credit. So we make sure that the funds are deposited, secured, and then we maintain liquidity to cover the city's expenses. And then we also have a responsibility to, given security and liquidity, to maximize as much as possible within those confines the interest income that we earned on that money. And to that effect, interest for the last couple of years has been at historic highs, interest rates. And I think if somebody had asked me a year ago what interest rates were going to look like now, I would have thought they would have gone down. But the world changed and things are different now. And so interest rates seem to be holding steady. It's very difficult to know where interest rates are going to be in the future, but they seem to be holding steady right now. And time will tell where interest rates head into the future. Beyond investing the city's cash in and that kind of thing, the treasurer's office is responsible to issue debt for capital projects. So we go through the motions of doing that once a year, typically, and issue and borrow money to cover the capital projects. And we work with the mayor's office and with the comptroller's office and with our advisors and our bond counsel to make sure that we are getting the best borrowing rate that we can. And then beyond that, some other initiatives that I have wanted to advance have been continuing technology advancements in how we manage our office with a big focus on data security. If you've watched the news at all recently, there's been a lot of instances of fraud taking place in municipalities. I think some might recently remember in the news that there was an experience the town of Arlington had with losing over $400,000 because of fraud that took place. And no city or town is immune to that. So I have undergone a review of all of our accounts to make sure that all of our bank accounts have debit blocks and check blocks if we don't issue checks on certain accounts. And where we do issue checks, we've increased the level of our services that are called positive pay, which make sure that the only checks that clear our account are checks that are authorized. So we do monitor that on an ongoing basis. It's really become a big part of what we do and a big part of what treasurers throughout the Commonwealth talk about when we have our conferences and our meetings. Fraud and fraud mitigation has become really just sort of a big thing we all have to be aware of and make sure we're guarding against. And fortunately, we haven't had any loss of funds as a result of fraud, but we, like most communities, we do see instances of people attempting to try to steal money from the city. So we've got all the protections in place to protect against that. One of the other things I'd point out is that Treasury in the past used to be a clerical function. It used to be a lot of data entry, payment entries, and that it really has migrated as technology has improved, and we've been able to use lockbox technology and scanning technology to really post payments and do a lot of the data entry. What we do in the office is really transformed into more of a financial analyst, more analytical tasks that we're doing. So instead of us posting payments, we're letting the lockbox and services that we work with do the actual posting, and we're dealing with exceptions. We're looking for things that might have gone wrong. We're doing the analysis that we need to do to make sure payments are posted properly and things like that. So our role has really kind of become more analytical. It's just sort of a interesting change that has happened in our world in Treasury. One of the other things I've been focusing on is migration to mostly a paperless operation. We used to fill up filing cabinets, and we have a storage room in the basement that we used to fill up with a mountain of boxes filled with paper that was taller than I am. And not that I'm that tall, but it was certainly taller than I am. That paper is gone. We have now are mostly a paperless operation. We've converted a lot of our processes in terms of taking in paper to scan reports and things that we save on the server, as opposed to printing a lot of paper. We actually surplused recently 10 filing cabinets because we don't need them anymore. So that was kind of an exciting day. So that's a little bit of the change that has gone on in Treasury. One of the other things I'd point out is that myself and several of my staff members have been heavily involved with the Massachusetts Collectors and Treasurers Association. I know I'm actually chairing their annual school subcommittee. We have what we call an annual school where we get together with treasurers from all over the Commonwealth and undergo training to continue to keep our skills up to date. And so I've been involved with that. My assistant treasurer has been involved with that. The assistant collector has been involved with that. So we go to a lot of these conferences to keep our skills up to date and make sure we're in tune with what's going on in other communities so that we don't, inadvertently isolate ourselves into sort of a silo here in Newton. So that's a lot of what we've been doing. I'll go through our budget a little bit. We have under Treasury the state assessments that are charged on the cherry sheet. So those are the state assessments that the Commonwealth charges the city for things like the MBTA and charter schools and the like. We don't really have a lot of discretion. We really have no discretion over those assessments. They really just come right off the top of our local aid. But for purposes of booking them, they're in the Treasury Department. As far as my operating budget is concerned, the Treasury operating budget, the personnel section of our operating budget, we're requesting to go up by $56,922. That's largely driven by by the union contract with AFSCME 3092. Of the 10 FTEs in our office, 6 of them are unionized. And then of course the non-union, there's some increases there as well. As far as the expense budget is concerned, I pretty much held the line on expenses. The only thing that we're asking for an increase on is mailing services and postage, and that's just because the cost of postage keeps going up. We're actually going out to bid for our mailing services contract, so we're hoping to get a good price going forward. That's going to be a 3-year contract, so we're hoping to get a good price going forward on mailing services. We are teaming up with DPW because, as you know, DPW sends out water and sewer bills. We send out the tax bills. So we teamed up with them to do a joint bid, which is kind of exciting. We haven't, I don't think we've ever done that before in the city. And by combining our volume into one large bid, we're hoping to get better pricing. So more to come on that at a later date. But just some of the highlights that we cover, expenses that are covered in the Treasury Department. Banking expenses, parking ticket collections, that's one of our larger line items. The expenses associated with the parking ticket collection program, obviously mailing tax bills, and a lot of other typical office expenses like office supplies and things like that. And then beyond that, the largest dollars in our budget are debt payments. So we have all the debt service payments listed that are coming due in fiscal year 26. And as well as the interest, and that is our budget in a nutshell. So if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. And it sounds like Maureen wants to add a little bit.
Go ahead, Maureen.
Thank you. If I may, Mr. Chair, I'm going to make a very quick comment. This applies to Steve Curley. It applies to Ron Mendez. It applies to Nick Reed. It applies to Perry Rosenfield and the other financial people who you will hear from on, I think, May 12th is when we will be back here with financial budgets. I just want to say that I believe I just passed my 15th anniversary last week being with the city. In my 15 years, we have never had such a strong financial team in this city. And so I just want to say to all of you as counselors, especially on the finance committee, it's so important that you're able to have faith in your financial professionals. This city has never been, in my opinion, at least in my 15 years, as well served as it is by the group of people that we have leading these different departments right now. So I just wanted to say it and acknowledge that. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. All right. First, I want to acknowledge I should have several minutes ago when she joined us, but Council Wright has joined the discussion, and I see that Council Krinsman has also joined us. Before I ask for questions, Ron, how did Arlington end up losing $400,000? What exactly happened?
Yeah, it was basically you had a fraudster impersonating a vendor, and they convinced somebody to change some wiring instructions on I don't remember exactly what it was for. I think it was some sort of a capital project payment, but you have all these invoices coming in when you have all these capital projects going on. I know we've got a lot of capital projects going on, so we have these really large invoice payments going out on a very frequent basis, and somehow somebody managed to some fraudster managed to convince somebody in the town of Arlington to change some wiring instructions to a bank that basically sent the money to nobody knows where. And that's basically how they lost over $400,000. I think it was 1 or 2 invoice payments.
I was going to ask, was it one large invoice just one time, or was it like several over a period of time that added up to 400,000?
I think it was 1 invoice, as I recall.
Okay.
One might have been 2, but it was but I do recall, I think it was 1 invoice payment that as soon as after the money went out, the vendor called probably a week or two later, wanting to know where their money was, and because they never got it, obviously. And that's when they looked through and they thought the people in the town thought the money had been paid and the vendor never got it. And then they put two and two together and realized that it was a fraudster impersonating the vendor, that caused that to go out that way.
Okay.
Surprisingly easy for something like that to happen. So we have to be on guard. That's one of the reasons why I implemented this PayModeX system that we have, because the PayModeX system that we have for vendor payments, which handles all of these electronic payments, they have procedures in place to make sure they're talking to who they're supposed to be talking to. And at any rate, the responsibility is on them to make sure that the money goes to the right place. And if it doesn't go to the right place, then it's on them to make sure they make good to the city. So.
Okay. And then one other quick thing, you mentioned interest rates. Where are larger reserve accounts, rainy day stabilization, school stabilization, accounts like that? Where is that money invested right now, and what kind of a return are we getting?
Yeah, so pretty much at MMDT. I also have an account set up with BNY Mellon, Bank of New York Mellon, that has some UST bills that are laddered into a laddered arrangement that I have that basically earns about the same amount of money. We're in the mid fours right now, 4.3, 4.4 is where we're at right now. That's just what MMDT is. Those are the highest rates we're earning. So that's really where I try to steer all of the money as it comes in. So as tax revenue comes in, the stabilization fund is there. As money comes in, we just steer it all right into, I actually have overnight automatic transfers set up that automatically, the money comes in and it automatically goes there and it accumulates and it gets steered right into MMDT. The investments that are laddered is something that I set up a couple of years ago that has really just been serving the city well. It takes money we don't necessarily need for liquidity purposes to cover payroll and to cover expenses, and just sort of segregates it onto the side where it's both collateralized because the investments are in U.S. Treasury obligations, so that inherently collateralizes them, and it also earns basically the same interest income that it would earn if it was at MMDT.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Greenberg.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms. Lemieux, for your for your gracious comments on your staff. It's nice to hear. And thank you, Mr. Mendes, for your presentation. I'm just curious, as you collect payments, what is the percentage of payments that aren't paid in total? Do you have that number?
Sure. So our collection rate on property taxes, now property taxes, that's the largest, obviously the largest source of revenue for the city. And it's really what the city depends on. Our collection rate is in excess of 99.9%. And that's driven largely because under state law, the city has a lien on every single property in the city to guarantee collection of that debt. We also work very closely with mortgage companies. Because roughly 60% of properties have a mortgage on them. And when there's a mortgage on it, in the majority of the cases, the mortgage holder requires a escrow be set up to pay taxes. So we actually collect a really large chunk of the property tax revenue through those mortgage escrow accounts. So we work closely with the mortgage companies and their tax services to make sure that if something is owed, that they know about it and they can act on it quickly. And as far as everybody else is concerned, what we do is, we send out the normal quarterly tax bills. And then if something does fall behind and we get past May 1st, which is the fourth quarter for fiscal year 25 is coming up. Once we get past May 1st, we send a series of reminder notices just to, we don't send demand notices just yet. We send reminder notices to people just to make sure that they don't forget that they didn't pay their property taxes. So we send those out. We send a series of those out over about 12 to 18 months before we move down the road of a demand notice and tax takings and that kind of thing. So we really try to work with taxpayers. We have people in payment plans So we work out arrangements with them. So I think we do a really good job at really trying to work with people, you know, in as amicably as we possibly can, to collect all the revenue that the city needs to function. Beyond that, excise taxes is the other large tax revenue volume wise that is collected. Our collection rate on that is a little bit lower than property taxes. It's more like 95%. You know, if you averaged it out, so that's a little bit lower. So that's really where our revenue. We collect almost everything we're owed, and then we do track and reconcile what is remaining.
So that's great to hear. Thank you so much. Thank you, Chair.
Absolutely.
Okay, Council Farrell.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Mendez. It's a terrific report. I appreciate it. This may be a little bit of an oddball question, but when developers or let's stick with it. When developers are fined for non-performance of some sort at a rate of, let's say, $300 a day, does the city have escrow accounts that those developers pay into until there is a settlement on the disagreement? And if so, is that something you would handle or the treasurer's office would handle?
So if there's so if I understand your question correctly, if there's a dispute between a developer and I presume inspectional services,
Yes.
is there an escrow account that's set up? Not typically. Typically something like that, we wouldn't receive anything until there is a final settlement. If there's fine revenue, obviously if fine revenue comes in, that's a general fund revenue, so that just goes right into the pot with everything else. But no, there isn't any escrow that's set up pending resolution of those types of disputes.
So these ISD fines, they're not fines then, is that correct? I mean, there is a situation in Newton where a person has been, a company has been fined $300 a day. And when you look at it right now, the total amount is somewhere in excess of $300,000. And that issue is in court. And I'm just sort of surprised that there is no way for the city to collect this money on a regular basis until there is a settlement, at which time if the defendant prevails, then that person would get that amount of money with interest, I presume. But if not, that money, if they fail and lose the case, then that money would stay with the city. My point is that I find it really hard to believe in this one particular situation that should this developer fail, I doubt that the first thing this person is going to do is say, oh, before I go bankrupt, I'm going to pay the city the $300,000+ that I owe them in fines or fees. I just think this is kind of a little bit of an odd situation on a city that is, one, looking for revenue, but also trying to enforce laws and ordinances. And in that manner, I don't know why we're not doing that sort of thing. Has this issue ever come up with you before?
It's probably a better question for the law department or ISD. But I mean, I have seen situations where either this city or other cities and towns could put, if there's accumulating fines, could put a lien on the property. And I have seen those liens get added to the tax bill as a special assessment. There is a procedure under the law to do that. But as I said, for something specific as what sounds like you're referring to, I think it's probably a better question for the law department or ISD directly, just because I don't want to say anything that
No,
might.
I understand. I appreciate it. That's why I'm trying to be as vague as I can about it. But it's not just one single instance that I know of. I know that there are times when there are work stoppages and fines automatically go into a daily fine, but there's no effort to collect them. And at least in a couple of cases, I think this is a pretty extraordinary loss for the city. So, but I will check with law department, and I thank you very much.
Okay, absolutely.
Nick, did you have your hand up? Do you have something to offer on?
No, I just had a passing thought, but it sounds like Ron's advice is the best.
You can share your passing thought.
Well, I was gonna say that it sounds like what's being referred to are liquidated damages, which are generally assessed, but then they're offset against whatever the city might owe to the contractor. It's not actually collected at the time it accrues. It's offset against whatever we might owe the contractor when the job is complete. But that's all I had to say.
I think Council Farrell was probably talking about a situation where a developer was being fined because they were in, violation of something with inspectional services. And, and the money has not been collected. But unfortunately, that happens and can't force somebody to, you can't go in and take the money out of their bank account. So the money, the fines continue to accrue, and we need to do everything, and I think we do, to make sure that when things are finally adjudicated, that we have some kind of a lien that protects our interests. But in the meantime, we don't have access to their bank account. So if they refuse to pay the fine, I don't know of a way that we can actually get the money. So anyway, anybody else have a question? Council Malachi, can you give me the bottom line figure so we can get a motion?
Yes, okay, so. All right, total department, including everything. I'm using a magnifying glass here. FY 26, $37,511,495.
Okay. So there is a motion on a straw vote to approve the mayor's recommendation for the Treasury Department. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the motion passes 7-0. Ron, thank you very much. Okay, last department this evening is purchasing. Nick, are you all set? You know what we're looking for? Why don't you go right ahead, please?
Sure. I am the chief procurement officer of the city. I oversee the purchasing department, but it's purchasing only describes a portion of what we do. I do oversee the purchasing, but I also have the mailroom and print shop as part of my responsibility. So, and that is, we interact with just about every department of the city. We do about, as far as the purchasing goes, we do about 100 bids a year and about 6,000 requisitions a year. And I sign off on every single procurement. It's everything from pencils to fire trucks. The purpose of the purchasing department is to make sure that everything is done legally. And also I have a procedures book, which makes sure that we follow a consistent policy. The purpose of the procedures book is just to make sure that everybody has the information. I'm more of a teach a man to fish guy than a give a man a fish guy. So if people understand why we do things the way we do, then it'll make more sense, and they don't need to come to us all the time. We had a very big year this year. Normally our purchases over a year like 60 million. This year was about 127 million. This past fiscal year, mostly because of ARPA funds and a lot of big projects. I don't know if you're aware of it, but there are many big projects going on in the city at the moment, school renovations and that sort of thing. So we don't do a lot of those procurements. All those projects are handled by outside project managers, but we sort of divide the work between the project manager and us, and they do the lion's share of it because they, after the procurement is done, they go ahead and manage the project. So we have done some work. We're done some work like Ron has done to eliminate as much as we can the paper in the department. We have a vault full of paper, but we've been gradually reducing it down and scanning and digitizing all our files as many as we can. We do keep files for as long as the retention period, which is 7 years, but anything else is has been scanned, and that is I'll get to it in a minute, but that's been freed up a lot of space. I'm also been working with the racial equity group and trying to figure out ways to do more outreach to what we call disadvantaged vendors, minorities, vendors, and women-owned companies, just to make sure that the tax monies of the city are spent equitably and fairly across the society. I also am responsible for the city's credit card, so we do any credit card transactions. We don't have a lot, but occasionally the city needs to purchase things by credit cards. I'm not in favor of that entirely because the credit card purchases don't really go through the Munis system, so you can't really track some of the expenses. But anyway, so the department is small. It's got 5 people, including me. It's a very stable department. I've been here for 13 years. I've hired 3 people in that time. 2 of them had worked for the department before, and we had 1 new person that was hired this year to replace Steve Vizot, who was our print and mailroom guy. And we've worked to kind of expand that position a bit. The current person there is John Miker, who used to work for the IT department. And the idea is that he can do some graphic stuff and tech stuff that maybe expands on what Steve could done. We also are going to add some work to what he does. He'll do some of the scanning, but I think we're going to take shredding in-house. We've been doing it. We've been hiring outside contractors to do that. And it's the city's been spending $5,000 or $6,000 a year on shredding between different departments. And we're thinking about getting we're definitely going to get a large commercial shredder for the print shop, and John will run that. That is not included in our budget. We're going to use funds from the current budget to pay for that. As far as the budget goes, it's only up about 4%. We have an increase in, I think we've gotten a little bit more on our leased equipment. We have postage meters, folder stuffer sealers, copiers, and things like that, which we lease, and those have gone up. Otherwise, it's just the regular salary increases. So it's about $28,000, I think, that the budget has gone up. So that's fairly flat, I think, in comparison to some other departments. I think that's. Oh, wait a minute. Wait. As a nod to Councillor Humphrey, I wanted to let him know that we had 10 POs for MassCore purchases this year, mostly from fire department, police, and PRC. Mostly school benches and uniforms and stationery, that kind of thing. Anyway, the total amount was $17,900.
Thank you for letting me know.
Right. You always ask, so.
All
Anyway,
set, Nick?
yeah, I think I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Good. Any questions? Council Bixby and then Council Malachi.
Thanks, Chair. So thanks for all this. And I guess we had a little bit of a peek into the trash contract that just came through, and how going out for different bids and trying to work with Brookline and those different things, helped bring down what would have been a perhaps, expected very high cost for new contract to, lower thing. Can you talk about other ways that that's gone? I mean, you mentioned a few in kind of the summary, but and I guess both sort of how we do that generally, and how does it, who comes up with the ideas of kind of how a bid like that, or a larger purchase or agreement that the city makes can how we can save money through the process? Am I asking the question in a way that makes sense?
Well, yeah, I think that, well, first of all, with respect to the trash contract, that trash collection is exempt purchase, and certain contracts are done through the law department. And the trash collection one was one of them. But just to speak to your question generally, what we typically do when we get a bid for something, some supplier service, we advertise it in numerous places, and we also maintain about 351 bid lists of vendors of supplies and services that we've dealt with in the past. So like art supplies, we have a list for art supplies, we have a list for plumbers, we have a list for painters, and all those people get notified of the issuance of a bid that would relate to their area. After that, we're required by law to award to the lowest responsible and responsive bidder. So all we can do is notify bidders, and then everybody has a fair chance to make some kind of proposal or bid for that supplier service. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I think that's a helpful context. I guess if there's sort of other creative ways that we can, maybe there aren't, aside
Well,
from, but things like the potential partnership with Brookline or other pieces like that, are kind of creative ways that we can save money.
We do a number of creative, like we participate in a cooperative contract for ammunition with Waltham. We actually sponsor a road salt bid, and Brookline sponsors a fuel, heating oil, and gasoline bid. The idea being that with a larger pool of bid, I think the salt bid has about 12 participating cities and towns. So the idea is that the larger the quantity, the bigger the contract, theoretically, the lower the unit cost per ton or whatever. So we do that.
Council Bixby, let me just jump in for a minute, because I think one of the points that you were making with the trash contract is, as you point out, Nick, I mean, that's something where we're allowed to negotiate directly with just the one vendor. However, we did that, and don't hold me to the numbers, but I believe that they offered us a contract that was like an increase of like 18%.
Mm-hmm.
And then, we also had looked at doing something with Brookline, but decided to go out to open bid. And when that happened, we still ended up with Waste Management, but the contract was a much lower percentage. I think the first year was maybe 8 at the most, maybe even a little bit less. And then it went down over the next 4 years. So the point being that in this, a number of us over the years have tried to encourage the administration, especially with the planning contracts, to go do more, more contracts through the open bid process. And correct me if I'm wrong, Council Bixby, but I think that's what you were trying to point out is how much money we saved over this 5-year contract by simply opening it up and going out to bid.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay,
I think
sorry.
that's, well, no, and I mean, just, also if there's, in the future, it seems like things like that would be
Well, the city,
good to try and do.
even if the city policy is even if something's exempt and isn't required to go out to bid, we go out to bid anyway, unless there's some compelling reason we don't. So what Councilor Gentile said is right, that even if you don't have to go out to bid, you're always better off bidding it out, because in this example that he showed, the vendor was willing to put in a lower price because there were other people bidding against him. He wasn't just negotiating a contract.
Maureen, did you want to add something on this topic before I go to Council Maliki?
Thank you. If I could quickly, Mr. Chair. And so Councilor Bixby, we've worked very, very hard over the years to really push everything to a bid process. One of the areas that we were not required to bid is in the use of our CDBG funds. And over the years, we've pushed to send most of those different projects that we're doing for homeowners who are in need of our help with our CDBG funds. We bid out most of those projects at this point in time, with the theory being that if we're bidding them out, if we can save money, maybe it's $10,000 on 5 different projects, then we can go out and do something for somebody else. And so we do it when it comes to the general fund. We do it when it comes to the federal funds that we received. We're very, very proactive in trying to make sure that we're getting the best price, because it's a zero-sum game, whether we're looking at tax revenues or CDBG money or whatever it is. You know, we only get so much money, and making sure that we're really stretching it as far as we can is incredibly important. So, so you're absolutely right in asking those questions.
Okay, Council Bixby, you all set?
Yep, thanks, everybody.
Okay, Councilor Maliki. I think you're muted.
Sorry. Yeah, I was curious about the shredding. You mentioned that you'll be buying, we had been paying 5,000 to 6,000 a year, and you'll be buying a commercial shredder. Does that, where does that show up in the budget line items?
It doesn't, because we're going to use funds that we have in this year's budget to buy it before the end of the
This year's budget. Okay. And is the shredding that happens periodically at Rumford Ave for the public to bring their, up to 3 bags or whatever, is that pardon me, is that under the same contract that we've been doing?
No, I think the way it's currently done is departments just go out into the 5,000 I came up with, was just asking all the departments how much they spent on shredding in a year. Like law will spend some money, clerk's office will spend some money, and that was just sort of the rough aggregate,
Oh, okay.
which justifies spending the money to have a machine of our own. Where we can
Okay, so the shredding expense has not been in your budget
No.
specifically, it's been in the different departments. And if you buy the commercial shredder, is that something, could you do like a paid service for people to bring in their stuff they want to get shredded, rather than waiting up to, I think it's like every 6 months or so, they do it at Rumford, for
for
$10 or
department-
something, they bring in stuff they need shredded in a hurry?
You talking about for private citizens?
Yeah, or for
Oh,
new residents or something
I
like
hadn't thought of
that.
that. Yeah, I don't know.
I-
I mean, I don't know how much, we don't know.
I don't know if it would be worth the sort of effort, but if you could, the way you can you pay online to get rid of your, old TV or something, and you take the receipt to Rumford and they take it for you. If it, in a sort of efficient way, that could be something you could pick up a little.
We don't do printing for private.
No, okay.
So I mean,
Yeah.
we could, I suppose, but I think John has enough to do without.
Okay, all right,
Yeah.
all right.
I don't know, in a year or so, maybe it'll be different. I don't know.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much.
Anyone else?
I would
Seeing
like to
none-
say something further.
Okay,
I've been here for 13 years. Maureen went out on a limb to hire me. And I have to say that it has been such an enormous privilege to have her as a boss, that she set such a high standard for all of us, that I don't think she was lucky in getting the people that she got. I think she really has guided us and helped us all along. So thank you.
thank you. Okay, seeing no one else looking to speak, Julia, can you give us
Okay.
the bottom line figure? It's a smaller one for this department, obviously.
Right. I'll do it with my magnifying glass. I'm awaiting a better prescription for my glasses, so that's gonna get rid of my double vision. Okay, so proposed FY 2026, $651,990.
Okay, so the motion has been made to, for that amount of money to support the mayor's recommendation for the purchasing department. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, the motion passes 7-0. All right, that concludes our work for this evening. Once again, I appreciate the attendance and also the fact that everyone does a great job of getting on here on time so we can get started. So have a great rest of the night, and we're adjourned. Thank you.
Good night. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Recording stopped.